Hello, and welcome to another episode of A Camera You May Have Never Heard of. Hello, welcome back. How you doing? How you been? Anyways, today we're going to be talking about one of the oldest cameras that I have in my collection. Not only is it one of the oldest cameras in my collection, it is one of the oldest 35mm cameras ever produced, which is pretty cool. But before we get into those details, this camera was given to me by one of my neighbors back when I lived at home with my parents. And they said, hey, here's this box of old camera stuff. We know you like photography. Go ahead, have at it. And I said, thanks. And it included this camera, but also some darkroom equipment that is what got me into developing my own film. And so shout out to Herm. So the camera that we're talking about today is this little guy right here. Now, I am horrible at pronouncing the name of the camera, so I'm going to have Google go ahead and pronounce it.
Certo, Dollina.
That's the name of the camera, like I said. And so this is a wonderful little rangefinder, and it has this really satisfying pop-out bellow lens that we see in a lot of older cameras. But like I said, this is one of the oldest 35mm cameras ever produced. And so we're going to go ahead and grab our handy-dandy little notebook and go over some of the details of this camera while we look at some wonderful little B-roll. As I was saying, this camera was introduced in 1936. Kodak had just started producing their 35mm cartridges in 1934, just 2 years before this camera was released, making this one of the earliest 35mm production cameras in existence, which is pretty neat to have in my collection. You know, I love 35mm. I've been shooting it for years, and so having one of the earliest cameras that ever used 35mm is pretty cool. So in 1936, this camera went for $75. Now that doesn't sound like a lot for a camera, but back in 1936, that was the equivalent of about $1,500 today. So by no means was this a cheap camera, but in 1936 and 35mm film just kind of starting out, it was probably pretty niche for someone to buy this. So they probably had to charge quite a bit for it. But for $75 in 1936, this camera came with a 5cm 2.9 lens, so a nifty 50. It shoots up to 500th of a second, which is a pretty fast shutter speed for a camera of its time. And it included this wonderful coupled split window viewfinder, or rangefinder, if you will, which helps you focus your shots. So some smaller details of this camera. If you look at the front of the lens here, we've got at the top the shutter speed, as you can select from bulb all the way to 500th of a second. Above that, you will see the little lever that activates the shutter, that charges it, if you will. Down at the bottom, we're going to have this little arrow that you can slide around side to side to choose your f-stop. And then right next to that, we're going to have the other lever to activate the shutter and take your photo. On the top of the camera, we have 3 dials. On the far left, that is the one for rewinding. On the far right, we have the one for winding the film when you're advancing it to the next frame. And then on the very top in the center, we're going to have the focusing wheel, if you will, that's going to help you focus that rangefinder that's attached to the top of the camera. Some fun little details that I like, of course, is that pop-out lens, the bellows at the front, which is really cool. You don't get to see this very often anymore, and it's really hard not to fidget with because it's so fun to just kind of play around with. Now, with all of that being said, I actually haven't had a chance to shoot with this camera yet. I've had it for several years now. It was given to me, it sat on the shelf for a bit, and then I happened to move out and buy a home, and it sat on a shelf even more. And so today we're going to change that. We're going to throw a roll of film into it. I'm going to be using this film right here, and we're going to see how this thing does. Now, I'm not expecting a whole lot, let me just say. It looks like it doesn't have any light leaks, or I'm not expecting any light leaks, but we never know with a camera of this age. It also looks like it has a clean and, no fungus, no mold, no dust in the lens. But like I said, it's nearly 100 years old. This thing might not do very well. It might not focus correctly or anything else in between. So I'm not expecting a whole lot, so don't expect a whole lot. But this is going to be more about experiencing shooting a camera that's nearly 100 years old, and so let's just see how it does. Let's give it a chance, so bear with me. Let's go get some photos, and let's see how it does. So something not super cool happened. So as I was saying, yeah, something not so great happened yesterday. I went out and shot with the
Certo, Dollina.
and everything was fine for the most part. I had a great time shooting with the camera. We'll talk about that here in a moment. But when I got home, I took the camera out of the bag, and for some reason, the back of the camera opened, exposing the film to my ceiling lights overhead in my house. I didn't really catch it right away, not paying attention, and I closed it as fast as I could once I did realize, but as far as I knew, the damage was done. I was pretty certain that the roll was completely ruined. I've done it in the past. These kinds of things just happen sometimes. But I said, you know what? I'm already going to be developing some rolls today. Let's go ahead and just get it in, and let's see if we can salvage anything. By golly, the film gods had blessed us yesterday, and we have some shots that look amazing. So while we talk about how it was shooting with the
Certo, Dollina.
we're going to take a look at some of these photos, and I'll talk about those here in a moment as well. But yeah, let's go ahead and take a look at what we got. So, shooting with the
Certo, Dollina.
was quite a pleasant experience. It was a great camera to walk around with. It's extremely small and pocketable and easy to use. And I was really pleasantly surprised at how much I liked shooting with it. I thought I was going to have a way harder of a time with it. I did have some struggles here and there, but for the most part, it was just a great camera to shoot with. It's so small and compact. You can throw it in your pocket. You can throw it in a crossbody bag, a fanny pack, whatever. And it's not going to take up a whole lot of space. It is quite heavy, you know, like I said, it's a dense camera. But besides that, like I said, it's very pocketable and it can go with you anywhere. But a couple of my issues that I had were forgetting to advance the film or forgetting if I've already advanced the film. So on my roll, there was a couple of blank slides as well as one or two double exposure shots, which I'll show one right now. But besides that, these photos came out great in my opinion. Now, I apologize for the dust and the scratches. I remember I thought this roll was ruined, so I was not taking care of it whatsoever. And so once I got to the scanning portion of it, I was pleasantly surprised to see the images that we got. But the images that we got have a lot of character. I love how they look. They're sharp, they're contrasty, they have a wonderful texture to them. I'm very, very happy with how this camera did. And I am probably going to be shooting with this camera a lot more. I want to try some other film stocks in it, see how it does. I want to try out some portraits as well. I shot mostly wide and landscape, and you know, I shot at f8. I wanted to make sure that everything was in focus as best as it could. I did not try shooting at 2.8. I didn't shoot anything super close. I mostly had this thing locked out at infinity on the focusing ring. Just to ensure that it could give it its best chance possible. But now that I know it can focus properly and how great these photos came out, I definitely want to try out some more stuff. And so I might be doing a portrait video with this camera just to see how it does with portraits outside using some natural light. So keep an eye out for that one. But with all that being said, like I said, it was a great camera to shoot with. I had a fantastic time. And I definitely see myself shooting with this camera a lot more in the future. So by all means, if you happen to feel like you want to shoot with an old camera like this, or you want to try out a different camera, this thing is a lot of fun to have. It's super small and compact. You can throw it in your daily bag with your other cameras and just kind of have it as a sidearm, if you will. Just to switch it up here and there. You know, it's a fantastic camera. Plus, it looks great on any shelf in your collection as well. Now, it ain't the cheapest camera in the world. I'll throw up some recently sold ones right here. But in my opinion, that's a pretty good value for the price. You get a really great camera for what you're paying for. But with all that being said, that is going to be today's episode. What did you think about the shots? Have any comments, questions, or concerns? And if you have any suggestions, just let me know in the comments down below. I'd love to know what kind of cameras you'd like to see me try. But as I was saying, thank you again for watching, and I'll see you on the next episode of A Camera You May Have Never Heard Of.